Just like they say, man, the Serbs are bad, sneak attacking Albania. When the mainline history admits it's the opposite. So Russia's saying they stand by their actions of recognizing completely Ossetia and Abkhazia. Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has said his decision to recognize Georgia's breakaway regions as independent is irrevocable. On the eve of the special EU summit on Georgia, he warned that Russia is ready to retaliate against any sanctions the EU might impose. And folks, when they impose these and Russia cuts off oil and gas to Europe, it'll be, oh, look how mean Russia is. Germany and the UK have differed in tone over how the EU should proceed, with Berlin warning against escalation. Moscow's envoy to London, and sanctions would hurt the EU more than Russia. And it goes on and on. But right now, let me play you about a minute and a half, 2 minutes of Vladimir Putin speaking to the international media. Let's go ahead and roll that now.
At this time, I was in Beijing and had an opportunity to have a brief discussion with the President of the United States. George told me that no one wants a war. I hoped that the U.S. administration would intervene to stop the aggression of the Georgian leadership, but nothing of this kind happened.
You've always enjoyed, over your period as President of Russia, and still now, a very close personal relationship with the U.S. President George W. Bush. Do you think that his failure to restrain the Georgian forces on this occasion has damaged that relationship?
Of course it has damaged our relations, first and foremost, interstate relations. But the thing is not only that the U.S. administration has failed to restrain the leadership from committing this criminal act, but in fact equipped and trained the Georgian army. But I have some other comment to add. Even during the Cold War, during the time of tough confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States, we have always avoided direct clashes between our civilians, let alone our servicemen. We have serious reasons to believe that directly in the combat zone, citizens of the United States were present. And if this is the case, then the suspicion arises that someone in the United States has on purpose created this conflict with a view to exacerbate the situation and create a competitive advantage for one of the presidential candidates in the United States.
These are quite astounding claims. Just to be clear, Mr. Prime Minister, are you suggesting that there were US operatives on the ground assisting Georgian forces, perhaps even provoking a conflict, in order to give a presidential candidate in the United States some kind of talking point? And if you are suggesting that, what evidence do you have?
Я вам сказал, что если подтвердятся факты присутствия американских граждан в зоне боевых действий...
I've told you that if the facts are confirmed that U.S. citizens were present in the combat zone, that it means only one thing, that they could be there only on the direct instruction of their leadership. And if this is so, then it means that American citizens are in the combat zone, performing their duties, and they can only do that following a direct order from their leaders and not on their own initiative. Ordinary experts, even if they are providing training in military matters, should do that, not in a combat zone, but at training ranges and training centers. I repeat, this needs to be further checked out. I'm telling you this based on what our military told me.
All right, we're going to come back after the news. Stay with us. More as this develops. I haven't even scratched the surface of the important information that we're going to be covering. It's all posted on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com right now. They have completely encircled Russia. NATO has announced they may preemptively strike Russia with nuclear weapons. We've never seen an escalation like this in the history with Russia. We'll be back.
Raging for the truth, exposing corruption, dismantling the false left-right paradigm. He's Alex Jones.
Criticized the Western media for what it's called its biased view on the conflict. But not all journalists blame Russia for the conflict. Well, we're now joined on the line by Alex Jones, the US investigative journalist from the Infowars.com website, to get his opinion on all this. Hello to you, Mr. Jones. So in your opinion, what was wrong with the coverage of this conflict in Western media?
Well, Ellis, thank you for having me on. First off, let me say I am ashamed as an American. I'm a loyal American who loves my country, but my country has been taken over by a private international military-industrial complex, and They launched the sneak attack on the Russian enclaves of Abkhazia and other areas, as you know, on 8/88, using the cover of the Olympic Games and a dastardly sneak attack on the order of Pearl Harbor.
All right, folks, I'm going to play that full 6-minute interview on Russia Today. That's their biggest domestic channel, their biggest international. It's standard, like Paul Watson, one of our webmasters, lives in London, and that's on his standard cable package. In fact, it's on cable right here in the United States. Tens of millions of viewers at any one time. And in 6 minutes, I broke down on Russian television exactly what's happening. And in the next hour, before Dr. Paul Greg Roberts joins us, in the last 30 minutes of the show, former head of the Treasury Department, father of Reaganomics, former Wall Street Journal editor, breaking down the treason of the New World Order neocons using our country for this. I'm going to play that and analyze it and break down. You know, some would say, well, why go on Russian TV and, speak out against what's happening? You have to do that. You have to save some of America's name. We're now known as the country of torture, the country of secret arrest, the country that stages terror attacks. The very people that run our nation, that control both parties, are the ones getting rid of our borders, destroying our currency, destroying our country's name. And they are now launching sneak attacks on Russian enclaves and handing part of Serbia over to Muslim countries while telling us to hide under our beds and give up all of our liberties of the evil Muslims will get us. On and on and on and on is the propaganda, the evil Muslim, the evil Muslim. But it's not the evil Muslim when it's their Muslims, and I'm not saying Muslims are evil, I'm quoting them, that are staging these terror attacks, that are attacking nations. And then every time the nation tries to defend itself, NATO, the United States, comes in and bombs the living daylights out of them, and then has such contempt for the American people, tells us that Russia started all of this. And now NATO and the EU are talking about sanctions on Russia. Russia is saying it's an act of war for more U.S. troops to be massing in Georgia and surrounding countries. Pressure is mounting on the EU to isolate Russia. Putin saying U.S. provoked Georgian conflict and saying that the U.S. did this for gain, but not the U.S., the multinational corporations that use us as their engine of domination and control. And the whole world's going into receivership, being bankrupted, being consolidated. I have the New York Times here today dealing with the fact that they're not just going to hand over city streets to private corporations, but city government operations. This is part of the IMF World Bank plan that we've been reporting on since 2002, when thousands of pages of IMF and World Bank documents got leaked. And they talked about how they go in, how they buy off governments, how they then bankrupt societies, create currency implosions so they can come in, the multinationals, and buy the country up cheap, and how they wanted to do it to Western Europe, the United States, and, of course, England. And they're doing that now. We're now 6 years later, and they're engineering all this, but they need you to rally around the flag and blame it all on a foreign enemy. They need that false patriotism, that false nationalism. So they go up and they punch the Russian bear right in the nose, and then it starts taking swipes at the bee that just stung it on the end of its nose, and our media has such contempt for us that they tell us that Russia started it all. Absolutely amazing. It is because I love this country that I'm speaking out against this, because it's my right and my duty to not allow my country to be hijacked by multinational corporations and used to start wars. And they need this. Their war on terror, their hoax is falling apart. The people are awakening to that, so they're trying to go back to their old Cold War. But this time, they're starting a hot war with Russia. And so because I love this country, I have to speak out against it being taken into criminal wars. You may want to believe the media about WMDs in Iraq and their lies there, but you can't believe them that Russia started this. It's time to wake up and realize our government's been hijacked, and they use phony patriotism to manipulate us. I want to go to Richard C. Cook. He's written for the Washington Post and scores of other top publications. He's a historian, been an analyst to the White House, to NASA. His bio goes on and on and on. You can check out his website. We'll give that to you. But he's with us for the rest of the hour. I know we have calls. We'll take those in the next half of the next hour. Then we've got, again, former head of policy, Department of Treasury, former Wall Street Journal editor, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, joining us to also talk about the Russia situation. Thank you for coming on, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Alex. Glad to be here.
You haven't been on this show, and it's on some stations that the weekday show isn't. Why don't you, just in a nutshell, tell us about your particular acumen, how you've come to your understanding of what's happening right now in Russia. You've written about all this happening before it happened, and then break down very simply what we're facing and cover the latest mega escalations, which I can't even find words to describe.
Well, you take a long-range view, and the Western powers have been under the control of an international financial elite going back probably at least a century. And what we're seeing now happening with Russia is simply the latest phase in what I call the second 100 Years' War. The first 100 Years' War, of course, took place back in the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, between England and France. And now we've seen the second 100 Years' War, where the international financial elite that wants to control everything has been pitting one nation against another. And the way it works is